Shropshire.
Now, you might have heard, if you've been listening to our evening show for a while, you might have heard Luke Allen before. I think he's still 15, might be 16 now. And he has been nominated for a lot of awards as a filmmaker. And he's been to some glitzy ceremonies in London, and he's done a podcast and loads of stuff and got celebrities to come and feature on his podcast. But what he's been doing in lockdown, frankly, for a teenage boy in 2020 is weird. And I don't think he'll mind me saying that, but it could be the entertainment you need for the lockdown, because he's been reviewing his favourite film 2 minutes at a time. So each episode of his podcast focuses on 2 minutes of this film. Apparently it's something that's happening quite a lot at the moment. There are an awful lot of films that have been sort of reviewed and podcasted upon in this way. I guess that makes for a lot of episodes, but he has focused on a film that perhaps you might not have expected him to. Or you might, because I've kind of lightly mocked him about his fandom of this film before. So I'll let him tell you exactly what he's doing shortly after the news. It's 7 o'clock. 72 Fahrenheit. So we're going to catch up with Luke Allen, who is a young filmmaker from Shropshire, but during lockdown he's been doing something quite niche, but you might just find it quite entertaining. We'll get a bit of an example of it and catch up with him after the Live Lounge All-Stars, covering Foo Fighters for charity, covering times like these. Anyway, let's talk to somebody you might have heard on the show before. Luke Allen's a filmmaker from Telford, but he's turning his hand to something a little bit different. And before we have a chat to him, let's hear a little bit.
I'm one of the hosts of 2 Minutes About Time. I'm Luke Allen. I'm joined right here with my co-host Robert E.G. Black.
Hello.
And we're going to attempt to try and tell you how this show works. So, Robert, you're so involved with the Movie by Minute community. To the listeners of BBC Radio Shropshire, how would you explain the Movie by Minute format?
Well, you take whatever movie, your favorite movie, a movie you're really into or has a lot going on, break it into 1 minute sections, and then you record an entire podcast episode just about that 1 minute. Obsess about whatever, go on whatever tangents, take you sometimes tangents upon tangents, and you forget how you even got onto a topic. It sounds like there wouldn't be anything to talk about, but remarkably there is so much.
Yeah, and as this being the first show I did, I was like, I don't know if I can do it a minute at a time, so we're doing it 2 minutes at a time instead. But, I mean, it basically just means the episodes are twice as long. Like, it's not done much else. We can often talk for about an hour about 2 minutes of the film, or often about anything but those 2 minutes of the film.
Right. Yeah, we talk about the minute for, like, the first 5-10 minutes, and then we get off on a tangent that takes us somewhere interesting.
Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, the episodes go out where we just look at the film About Time and talk about it and talk about Richard Curtis and how his films work and all the different cast, what their backgrounds are. Robert often obsesses about the locations in which things are filmed. It might sound boring, and if it does, then maybe you're not the target audience for this, or maybe you are. I recommend you give it a go. Maybe just hop in to episode 1. It's one of our shorter episodes, about 20 minutes long, I think, where we just talk about the opening scenes, a lot about like the Universal logo and things like that. You know, it's just a chance to see what you think of the format. And maybe if you're not a fan of About Time, you can check out one of the other shows under the Movie by Minutes format. There are tons and tons.
Yeah, last I saw there was, it's at 157 when I submitted this one.
So, can you remind me what the website address is for me?
It's just moviesbyminutes.com. It's a lot of movies, a lot of franchises. The big one, like the original, that we usually cite as the original, is Star Wars Minute. And they've covered 10 movies now, I think? Or no, 8. I don't know. They're just finishing Rogue One. And they've been going in release order.
Basically, it's a heck of a lot. And, you know, there is a whole community here of shows and stuff, which many people, when we try and explain it to them, think is a complete nonsense and stupid idea for the show. Even the guests we've had on, they're like, I don't think I can talk for very long, and they'll be like, oh, I can only do an hour, hour and a half, and next thing we know, we've recorded for like over 3 hours and have to trim it down.
Okay, so that's what it's all about. Let's speak to Luke now. Good evening, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm all right. This is a great idea, I think. So how many episodes have you done?
As in released or as in recorded?
Oh, well, recorded, yeah.
Okay, we've recorded up to 13 weeks of the show, so 3 episodes a week.
You've done 39 episodes already.
39 episodes. 9 of which are out. We like to record way ahead, because that way if things end up messing up, we've got a good backlog. So we record 2 weeks worth of episodes each week, and we didn't start releasing until we were about halfway through covering the entire film already.
Oh, so you must have gotten pretty much 2/3 of the way through now.
Yeah, I believe so. I'm trying to check. I think we're possibly just past halfway. It's confusing because it depends whether we're counting the end credits, which we will do some episodes on, but they'll be harder than others to cover. But yeah,
so
around about that point, yeah.
Remind me of your love for Richard Curtis in About Time, because I still find this the most amazing fact about you, that despite, being a filmmaker yourself, it is this film that you select from the history of cinema as the greatest masterpiece ever laid down on film.
Yeah, I think one important thing to say is, for a film to be perfect, the good things just have to outweigh the flaws easily enough. So, I don't know whether I go as far to say it is a perfect film, but among all the major films that are stood in pop culture as some of the greatest films, this is the one which, whenever I watch it, I get the most enjoyment out of. I'm not quite sure why. I've had a fascination for Richard Curtis rom-coms for about 3 or 4 years now. I can't figure out what it is that's led me to it. I think just some of the comedy in his writing. I mean, outside of rom-coms, Richard Curtis wrote the Doctor Who episode Vincent and the Doctor, which is incredible. He wrote, he founded Comic Relief. He wrote Mr. Bean, Blackadder. Like, he's a genius. So, looking at all the stuff he's done, I then came across this film. First time I watched it, it didn't really do much. Second time, something clicked, and then the more I watch it, the more I appreciated it, until suddenly I'm here and I know it basically inside out, and I've obsessed over it a lot.
Do you like the creation of England that Richard Curtis sort of has in his head? Because it always feels like his stuff is in the same sort of universe.
Yeah, I think so. There is that sort of simplicity to it, which I think especially I kind of binged through pretty much all Richard Curtis films. There's a couple which are really hard to get that I haven't managed to yet acquire, but I binged through every Richard Curtis film I owned near the start of lockdown. And there's something about it that almost feels like a warm hug, like a piece of comfort. And I think that's, now's the time more than ever that people need that, really.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. So how much detail do you go into when you've got, what's your average length of episode is how long?
Well, the first few were about 20 minutes. The more guests we have on, we tend to record each episode ends up, looking at 2 minutes of the film, each episode before being edited is between an hour and a half, and we tend to trim that down to about 45 minutes. So
you have time to go down a lot of tangents here.
Yeah, I think the important thing about Movie by Minute is that the tangents are just allowed to happen, and they make it a lot more interesting, because, I love analysing a film and going, what does this camera angle mean? What is this? But to go into this and go, okay, so this is how Tim reacts in this situation. Which of these similar situations have we been in? Often there's some really funny anecdotes and routes to go down, where I think it just makes it a more interesting listen, really, I hope. Some of the guests we've had on don't know how this format of show works, and so once they realise that actually there's basically freedom to talk about anything, they're quite enjoyed it.
So the 2 minutes that you watch are essentially a conversation starter?
Yeah, to an extent, yeah. We'll make sure, obviously, that we've covered the whole thing over it, but we'll read through the dialogue normally at the start, and then we'll talk about the different angles. My co-host Robert obsesses about locations to an incredible extent. He's in California, but his skills with Google Maps and tracking stuff down, like he'll be like, okay, I don't get why Tim and Mary use this tube station when the other tube station was 2 minutes closer to her house, and they're walking the wrong direction to get to there. It's just, really intriguing stuff that he goes down with.
How did you convince a university lecturer in California to co-host your podcast with you?
Well, he's done this stuff for a while. I've been listening to these podcasts on and off for about 2 or 3 years. And as I started doing my podcast, Please Be Seated, which was just different guests reviewing a film of their choice, which, to specify, is a massive jump from doing about 6 episodes a year to 3 episodes a week. But yeah, it was. So I'd guested on a few of those shows. He hosts The Room Minute, looking at the famously bad movie The Room 1 minute at a time. And I've guested on about 9 episodes of that. And at some point over Facebook, we started chatting about time. He said he wanted to host a podcast looking at it a minute at a time or 2 minutes at a time. And I sort of jokingly said, oh, I'd like to co-host. And I sort of repeated that joke until it wasn't a joke. and then when lockdown happened, it was like, okay, we both got a lot more free time. I was like, I've probably got more free time here than likely to get any other time soon. Now's a better chance than any to sit down and record it. And actually, I mean, considering I've nearly covered half of it, it isn't half as difficult as I thought it was going to be.
To be fair, that's basically how I got this job. Now, your litany of guests is always quite impressive. Who have you got involved this time?
Okay, so originally, and we've still got several of them, we were looking at just podcasters in general. Just different people who've done these shows, because often we all guest on each other's shows. Then I started going to a few other contacts I had. So I had Alex and Helen, who were the leads in Unstable, my short film. And then I thought, I'll contact Simon Fisher-Becker, who's an actor from Doctor Who and Harry Potter. He came to the Unstable premiere, and we've been in good contact since then. So he came on the show. We've had BAFTA-nominated director Piotr Skopiak. Just this week, I'm recording with Ewan McIntosh, who played Big Keith in The Office. And weirdly, we got a shout-out on Twitter last night from Darren Brown, who wants to guest on the show, which is really unexpected.
Yeah. Look, I'm never more impressed than you've got Keith from The Office on. That's a sensational get. Did you just approach them on social media again? Yeah,
his one was kind of weird. It was like I'd watched glimpses of The Office, and then during lockdown I was like, I'm just going to watch it through. And literally the day I finished watching it, scrolling through Facebook, and he was on my possible you may know friends list. So I just sent him a friend request and said, I'd love to talk with you about The Office sometime. And I thought, you know what, there's no harm. And I asked him if he'd want to come on 2 minutes about time to talk about time. It's like, I've not seen the film, but sure. And we're recording with him on Wednesday. So for the listeners of Radio Shropshire, that episode probably won't be on until late August, early September.
Is Darren Brown just a fan of the film?
Yeah, he was tweeting about his love of the film About Time. And after emailing him and figuring out how he found the show, he literally searched for Richard Curtis on Twitter, and we were one of the first things that came up. So he decided to shout us out, say, oh, by the way, there's a specialist podcast all about it. And I sort of jokingly said, oh, we should get you on sometime. And then he DM'd me and said, yeah, it'd be great to have on. In fact, I once had Rachel McAdams round for dinner, but didn't know who she was. And I was like,
wow, there's your anecdote.
That's a worthwhile enough anecdote to have you on the show. And I mean, it surprised me how far this show's gone, because, I know that Richard Curtis has listened to the first episode or two, and he and Emma Freud, his girlfriend, who's also his producer, has sent me signed pictures. So, yeah, it's just kind of surreal to think, actually, he knows I exist now.
Yeah. Well, I love that you get people at your premieres, you get people in your films, you get people on your podcasts, just basically by having the brass neck to ask, don't you?
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic. So what are you doing next? Because are you 16 now?
Yeah.
So I guess you should have been doing GCSEs and things.
Yeah, so that's still a weird thing which I'm still trying to get to come to terms with.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, next I'm currently writing a script for a web series pilot that I've had an idea for, which is set loosely in the same universe as Unstable, but goes down a whole other realm of avenues. And I've already got some really great cast agreed to do it before I've even written the thing, so I should probably write it soon. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I'm procrastinating a lot, but a lot of time is taken with this podcast, which is fun.
Yeah, and are you sort of still planning on, college next and all of that?
Yeah, so I'm going to Shrewsbury College to study film sociology and combined English. So hopefully they'll all complement going down a route of filmmaking, and hopefully the skills that I'll pick up from doing this podcast are going to be worthwhile in A-level film as well.
Absolutely. So where can people listen?
They can just search for 2 Minutes About Time on iTunes, Spotify, pretty much any of the good podcast platforms, I believe. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at 2 Mins About Time. So it's the word 2 in the title and the number 2 on social media. I don't know how much of a difference that makes in searching, but it's worth clearing up just in case.
Luke, top man, keep safe and stay in touch when you've got your next project up and running.
Thanks, definitely will. Thanks for having me on.
No problem, as ever. I love Luke. He's brilliant because he does stuff. Wants to make films, so he just makes them and just asks legit actors to be in them, and some of the time they do. Which I suppose, just goes to highlight the fact that a lot of actors have time on their hands. But he does some brilliant work, tackling some great subjects as well. Really nice guy as well. It's Luke Allen from Telford on BBC Radio Shropshire, and this is Pulp.
The 2 Minutes About Time theme is performed by Ethan O'Mahony and is a cover of the About Time theme originally composed by Nick Laird-Close. 2 Minutes About Time is a production of Lemming Drop Studios in association with Bottle-O Productions.